Did you know cavemen outsmarted nature's deadliest ice age with tricks we've completely forgotten? Stay tuned to uncover the secrets that kept them alive. From the techniques they used to keep fire alive in extreme cold to working in groups and passing down knowledge through generations. What's the one thing you'd need to survive a freezing ice age? Picture this. It's 20,000 years ago, and the world is a frozen wasteland. Temperatures plummet below zero, and the wind bites like 1,000 needles. For cavemen, fire wasn't just a luxury, it was life itself. But here's the kicker. Starting a fire in a world of ice and snow was no easy feat. So, how did they do it? Cavemen didn't have matches or lighters, so they relied on friction-based methods like the hand drill or bow drill. They'd find dry wood, often a rare treasure in icy conditions, and use a spindle to grind against a fireboard until sparks flew. Flint and pyrite were their secret weapons, striking them together to create a spark that could ignite tinder. But wait, there's more. Keeping that fire alive in howling winds or damp caves? That was the real challenge. They'd carry embers in hollowed-out bones or use animal fat to make portable fire kits. This wasn't just about staying warm. Fire meant survival. Cooking meat to make it digestible, purifying water, and even hardening wooden tools. Without fire, they'd have been at the mercy of the cold. And here's the crazy part. Some evidence suggests they used fire to drive animals into traps during hunts, turning flames into a weapon. Imagine the ingenuity it took to master this in a world where one mistake could mean death. Cavemen also had to be strategic about fuel. In a treeless tundra, they burned bones, dung, or even mammoth fat when wood was scarce. Now, if you've ever wondered how they kept their fires burning through blizzards, they built windbreaks from hides or stones, creating microclimates to protect their precious flames. This wasn't just survival, it was pure brilliance. But that's not even the wildest part of their fire mastery. Fire wasn't just a tool for warmth, it was a social and survival game changer. Cavemen used fire to transform their environment, like heating caves to make them livable. Archaeological sites like those in France's Dordogne region show hearths built deep inside caves, where families gathered to share warmth and stories. Can you imagine huddling around a fire, the only thing keeping you from freezing? Fire also revolutionized their diet. Raw meat was tough to chew and often carried parasites, but cooking made it safer and easier to digest, unlocking more calories. This was huge during the Ice Age when food was scarce. Scientists believe cooking helped human brains grow larger because it freed up energy from digestion. So, in a way, fire shaped who we are today. But maintaining a fire was a full-time job. Someone had to guard it, feed it, and ensure it never went out. What happens if it dies in the middle of a snowstorm? Cavemen planned ahead, drying tinder like moss or bark during rare dry spells. They also used fire to signal other groups, creating networks across the frozen landscape. Pretty smart, right? Another trick? They used fire to craft better tools. By charring the tips of wooden spears, they made them harder and sharper for hunting. Fire was their Swiss Army knife, used for everything from defense to creativity. But hold on, there's one more fire trick that'll blow your mind. Cavemen may have used smoke to preserve food, extending its shelf life in a world without refrigerators. This wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about thriving in it. Want to know how they turned fire into a predator's worst nightmare? Keep watching. I know you think you've heard it all, but you're not even close. Fire was cavemen's ultimate weapon against the Ice Age's deadliest threats, predators. Wolves, cave bears, and saber-toothed cats roamed the tundra, and a single spark could mean the difference between life and death. Cavemen used blazing torches to scare off animals or drive them into traps during hunts. Imagine waving a fiery stick at a snarling beast. They also built fire rings around camps to create safe zones. Sites like Kostenki in Russia show evidence of circular hearths, suggesting they used fire as a protective barrier. How's that for outsmarting nature? Fire wasn't just about survival, it gave them control over their environment. But fire also had a deeper role. It brought people together. Around the hearth, cavemen shared meals, planned hunts, and passed down knowledge. Ever think about how a flickering flame could spark human connection? It's no stretch to say fire was the heart of their communities, keeping spirits high in the darkest winters. Cavemen didn't just master fire, They adapted it to the Ice Age's extremes. In places like Siberia, where wood was nearly non-existent, they burned animal bones to keep fires going. Bone fires burn hotter and longer than wood, giving them an edge in brutal conditions. Who knew bones could be so clutch? By mastering fire, cavemen turned a frozen hellscape into a survivable home. From warmth to food to protection, fire was their lifeline. But here's a question. Could you survive a week in the Ice Age with just a spark? Their fire tricks are a testament to human ingenuity, and we're just getting started. Next up, how did cavemen hunt giants with nothing but sticks and stones? You won't believe this. You see, fire kept them alive, but surviving the Ice Age meant taking down beasts 10 times their size. How did cavemen hunt mammoths with primitive tools? Let's find out. If you could take down a 10-ton mammoth with just a spear and some friends, then welcome to the Ice Age, where cavemen faced off against beasts that make modern elephants look small. Mammoths, woolly rhinos and giant elk roamed the frozen tundra, and hunting them was no joke. So how did cavemen pull it off? Let's dive into their genius hunting tricks. First, cavemen were masters of teamwork. No single hunter could tackle a mammoth alone, so they worked in groups, sometimes dozens strong. They'd study animal patterns, tracking herds across the icy plains. Wondering how they knew where to find these giants, they followed signs like footprints, dung, or even grazed plants. These guys were like prehistoric detectives. Their weapons were simple but deadly. They crafted spears from wood and flint, sharpening tips to pierce thick hides. But here's the wild part, they didn't always throw spears. Instead, they used atlatls, simple stick-like tools that acted like an extension of their arm, launching spears with way more force. Imagine chucking a spear at 80 miles an hour with just a flick of your wrist. Cavemen also used the landscape to their advantage. They'd drive animals toward cliffs or narrow valleys where escape was tough. Wait till you hear this. In sites like Saluta in France, archaeologists found piles of bones, showing they herded entire groups of animals off cliffs. This wasn't just hunting, it was strategy on another level. But that's not even the smartest part of their hunting game. They didn't just rely on brute force. Cavemen planned, observed and adapted, turning primitive tools into mammoth-slaying machines. If you're interested in finding out how they turned nature itself into a weapon, keep watching. Cavemen didn't just hunt, they outsmarted their prey. One of their slickest moves was using traps and ambushes. They'd dig pits, line them with spikes and cover them with branches to trap heavy beasts like mammoths or rhinos. Can you imagine a 10-ton animal crashing through a hidden trap? Sites like La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey show evidence of such traps, with bones piled up from successful hunts. They also used fire as a hunting tool. Sounds wild, right? By setting controlled fires, they could drive herds into confined areas or toward cliffs. This wasn't random. They studied wind patterns to control the flames. How's that for next-level planning? Fire wasn't just for warmth. It was a weapon to corral giants. Another trick, they targeted weaker animals. Cavemen weren't dumb. They went for young, old, or injured beasts that couldn't fight back as hard. They'd watch herds for days, spotting limps or stragglers. This saved energy and reduced risk. Cavemen also crafted specialized tools for the job. Beyond spears, they made bowlers, weighted ropes to tangle an animal's legs. Picture this. A hunter hurls a bowler, trips a charging elk, and the team moves in for the kill. Teamwork, strategy and tools made them unstoppable. But hold up, there's one more hunting hack that's straight up genius. They used animal behavior against them, like mimicking calls to lure prey closer. The hunt was just the start. The real showstopper is how they turned it into a feast. At this point, hunting wasn't really the hard part, but processing it was. A single mammoth could feed a group for weeks, but turning a giant into dinner took serious skill. How did they do it without modern tools? Let's break it down. First, cavemen were experts at butchering. Using sharp flint knives, they'd skin the animal, carve out meat, and even crack bones for marrow, a calorie-packed superfood. Here's something nuts. One mammoth could yield hundreds of pounds of meat. They worked fast to avoid scavengers like wolves or hyenas. They'd use fire or loud noises to scare them off while processing the kill. They didn't waste a single part. Hides became clothing or shelter covers, bones turned into tools or fuel, and sinews were twisted into strong cordage for binding. Talk about zero waste. This resourcefulness was key in the Ice Age, where every scrap counted. If you ask me, I'd say hunting wasn't just about food, it was a cultural event. Successful hunts boosted morale and strengthened group bonds. Some sites, like those in Ukraine, show mammoth bones arranged in patterns, hinting at rituals or celebrations. Can you picture a feast under the stars after a big hunt? Cavemen's hunting tricks, teamwork, traps and tools showed their brilliance. They didn't just survive, they dominated a world of giants. But what about when the hunt was over? Their shelters kept them safe from the Ice Age's wrath. And that's where we're headed next. The real challenge was building homes that could survive the wild. Here's how cavemen pulled it off. Hunting giants fed their bodies, but surviving the Ice Age meant staying warm and safe. How did cavemen build shelters to defy the frozen wilderness? Let's find out. Could you build a house in a frozen wasteland with just bones and hides? Imagine this. It's the peak of the Ice Age and blizzards rage outside. Cavemen didn't have brick or mortar, but they built shelters that kept them alive in sub-zero temperatures. How on earth did they do it? Let's dive into their genius building tricks. Cavemen were masters at using what the land gave them. In places like Ukraine's Mezhyrich site, they constructed shelters from mammoth bones and tusks, stacking them into sturdy frameworks. Sounds insane, right? These bones were heavy, but they provided a solid base that could withstand howling winds. They'd drape animal hides over the frame, sewing them tight with bone needles and sinew thread. And they insulated these shelters like pros. They packed snow around the base to block drafts and layered hides with grass or fur for extra warmth. In some cases, they dug shallow pits into the ground to create a sunken floor, trapping heat inside. These shelters were surprisingly snug, even in -20-degree weather. Location was everything. Cavemen chose spots wisely, near rivers for water, but high enough to avoid flooding. They'd face entrances away from prevailing winds, using natural features like hills or cliffs for protection. Some shelters had hearths at the center, with smoke escaping through a small hole in the roof. This kept the air breathable while warming the space. Their resourcefulness turned a frozen hellscape into a livable home. But how did they keep the dangers at bay? The answer is coming up. If you think a bone and hide hut could stop a cave bear, think again. Cavemen didn't just build shelters for warmth. They designed them to keep out the Ice Age's deadliest predators. How did they make their homes a fortress? Let's break it down. To deter animals like wolves or saber-toothed cats, cavemen reinforced their shelters. They'd pile heavy rocks or extra bones around the base, making it tough for claws to dig through. Here's something crazy. Some shelters had spiked branches or sharpened bones sticking out like prehistoric barbed wire. This wasn't just a home, it was a bunker. But wait, there's a cool twist. They used fire strategically. Hearths weren't just for warmth, the smoke and glow kept predators at bay. Some groups built small fire pits outside entrances as an extra deterrent. Can you picture a wolf slinking away from a glowing camp? It's like they invented the first security system. Cavemen also thought about airflow. In tight shelters, smoke from fires could choke them, so they crafted vents or used hide flaps to control airflow. No modern tech, no problem. How did our ancestors outsmart carbon monoxide poisoning? Some groups were nomadic, following herds, so they made lightweight shelters from branches and hides that could be packed up and moved. Pretty clever, right? These portable homes were quick to assemble, letting them adapt to the Ice Age's unpredictable weather. In contrast, permanent shelters like those in Russia's Kostenki site show complex designs with multiple rooms for families. But that's not all. The way they built their homes gives us a fascinating look into their social structure and values. More than just a roof over their heads, these ancient homes were the foundation of their communities. Let's explore the last and most impressive shelter tricks. These shelters were social hubs. Families gathered inside to share food, tell stories and plan hunts. Archaeological sites show tools, jewelry and even art near hearths, suggesting that shelters were spaces for creativity and bonding. Some had carved bones or painted stones, hinting at rituals or decoration. Who knew cavemen had an eye for interior design? They also built for the long haul. In permanent settlements, shelters were repaired and expanded over generations. Some mammoth bone structures lasted decades, showing serious engineering skills. They'd replace worn hides or reinforce weak spots, keeping homes sturdy through brutal winters. But what about extreme conditions? In the harshest regions like Siberia, cavemen dug into hillsides to create semi-subterranean shelters. These earth lodges used the ground's natural insulation to stay warm, with bone or wood frames for support. Talk about working smarter, not harder. Shelters also reflected their resourcefulness. Without trees, they used whatever was available: bones, hides, even frozen soil. Can you believe they turned a frozen wasteland into a cozy village? These homes were proof of their adaptability, turning the Ice Age's challenges into opportunities. Shelters kept them safe, but surviving the Ice Age meant finding food in a frozen world. How did cavemen forage and store enough to outlast winter? Let's dive in. Could you find food in a world locked in ice? Picture the Ice Age. Plants are buried under snow, animals are scarce, and starvation is a real threat. Yet cavemen didn't just survive, they thrived by mastering the art of foraging and food storage. How did they pull it off? Let's uncover their secrets. Cavemen were expert foragers, even in frozen landscapes. They knew which plants could survive the cold, like hardy roots, berries, and lichens. They'd dig through drifts or follow animal tracks to plants grazed by herds. Women and children often led foraging, gathering edible bark, moss, or even seaweed near coasts. Pretty resourceful, right? But plants were only half the story. Meat from hunts was their main calorie source, and they had to make it last. Without fridges, they preserved meat by drying it in the sun or smoking it over fires. Sites like those in Germany show evidence of smoke-drying racks, where strips of mammoth or reindeer meat were hung to cure. This preserved food for weeks, even months. They used natural freezers. In icy regions, they buried meat in permafrost or snow pits, letting the cold keep it fresh. Can you imagine using a glacier as your fridge? They'd mark these caches with stones to find them later, ensuring a food supply during lean times. Cavemen also scavenged cleverly. When fresh kills weren't possible, they'd take meat from predator kills or crack bones for marrow. But that's not even the smartest trick. Their knowledge of the land and seasons made them unstoppable foragers. If you think foraging was just picking berries, think again. Cavemen's food tricks were about outsmarting scarcity. They didn't just gather food, they planned for it. So how did they know what to eat in a frozen world? One thing about caveman is that they had an encyclopedic knowledge of their environment. By observing animals, they learned which plants were safe. For example, if reindeer ate certain mosses, they'd try them too. Pure instinct and observation. Just like deer, our ancestors learned to distinguish between toxic and nutritious plants. They fermented food to make it last. In some regions, they'd bury fish or meat in sealed pits with plants, letting natural bacteria preserve it. This early fermentation wasn't just practical, it added flavor and nutrients. Who knew cavemen were foodies? Storage was another genius move. They crafted containers from hides, bark, or even hollowed bones to store dried berries or nuts. In colder climates, they used ice itself, carving out frozen shelves in caves to keep food safe from scavengers. Sites in Siberia show frozen fish stashed in such spots, perfectly preserved. They also shared food strategically. After big hunts, groups would divide meat to ensure everyone ate, strengthening community bonds. This wasn't just survival, it was about trust and cooperation. Food wasn't just fuel, for cavemen it was a lifeline. Foraging and storage weren't just about filling bellies, they shaped caveman culture and survival. How did they make the most of what they had? From survival to sustainability, cavemen were seasonal pros. They timed foraging with nature's cycles, gathering berries in summer or nuts in fall to prepare for winter. They'd migrate to follow food sources like herds or ripening plants, ensuring a steady supply. Sites like Spain's El Mirón cave show stashes of hazelnuts, proof of their planning. But what about taste? They didn't just eat to survive, they experimented. Evidence suggests they seasoned food with herbs or roasted seeds for flavor. Caveman cuisine gets a gourmet twist. small touches that made a big difference in harsh times. They also protected their food like treasure. To keep scavengers away, they'd hang meat high in trees or guard caches with fire. Some groups even built small storage huts from bones and hides like mini pantries. This ensured their hard-won food stayed safe. And here's the crazy part: food shaped their social world. Sharing meals around a fire wasn't just practical, it built trust and stories. By mastering foraging and storage, cavemen turned a frozen world into a sustainable one. But what kept their communities strong through it all? That's where their social bonds come in. And we're diving into that next. Food kept them alive, but it was their unbreakable bonds that made survival possible. How did cavemen build communities to outlast the Ice Age? Let's solve mystery. Picture this: a world of ice, where blizzards howl and danger lurks everywhere. Cavemen didn't just face the cold, they faced it together. Their social bonds were the glue that held them through the deadliest winters. How did they build communities that thrived? Let's dive in. Cavemen lived in tight-knit groups, often 20 to 50 people, sharing everything from food to fire. No one could survive alone. Hunting, foraging, and shelter building took collective effort. They divided tasks. Men hunted, women foraged, and elders taught skills. This wasn't just survival, it was a system. But here's the wild part: they communicated without modern language. Grunts, gestures, and early speech helped them plan hunts or warn of danger. They also traded with other groups. Finds like seashell beads in inland Europe prove they swapped goods over long distances, sharing tools or furs. This built alliances, ensuring help in tough times. These networks were like an Ice Age safety net. Cavemen's social bonds went beyond work. They celebrated together. Evidence of feasts like bone piles at Ukraine's Mezirik site suggests they gathered to share food and stories. But that's not even the deepest part of their community magic. Their unity turned a brutal world into a hopeful one. The darkness outside couldn't dim their spirits. Learn how they kept hope alive. Think surviving was all work and no play? Think again! Cavemen's social bonds weren't just practical, they were emotional lifelines. How did they stay hopeful in a frozen world? Let's unpack their genius. Storytelling was huge. Around flickering fires they shared tales of hunts or ancestors, keeping morale high. These stories weren't just entertainment, they built identity and purpose. They cared for each other. Bones from sites like Croatia's Krapina show healed injuries, meaning someone nursed the wounded back to health. In a world where a broken leg could mean death, this was huge. Can you imagine carrying a friend through a blizzard? Rituals also bonded them. Some graves had tools and jewelry, hinting at beliefs in an afterlife or honoring the dead. This gave them hope, even in the Ice Age's darkest moments. Elders passed down skills like tool-making or foraging, ensuring survival knowledge wasn't lost. No classrooms needed. How did our ancient ancestors pass on knowledge through hands-on learning? Beyond mere survival, there's a beautiful bonds that made their communities truly thrive. Cavemen's social bonds created a legacy that shaped humanity. How did they turn groups into families? Let's wrap up their secrets. They shared everything. Food from hunts or foraging was divided, ensuring no one went hungry. This wasn't just fairness, it built trust. But what about conflict? Sure, they had disputes, but cooperation was key. Evidence of group burials suggests they mourned together, uniting in grief. They also resolved conflicts through rituals or shared tasks, keeping the peace. Their bonds extended to art and creativity. Carvings, beads, and cave art weren't just decoration, they were expressions of identity. More than just a pretty face, what did ancient jewelry really signify? These bonds helped them innovate. By sharing ideas, they improved tools, shelters, and hunting tricks. Their communities were think tanks, driving progress in a frozen world. Cavemen's social bonds were their ultimate weapon against the Ice Age. We'll wrap up with how these tricks tie together and what they mean for us today. So, what did we learn from our Ice Age ancestors? Cavemen didn't just survive the deadliest Ice Age, they thrived with fire, hunting, shelters, foraging, and unbreakable bonds. From turning flames into weapons to building bone houses and sharing stories, their ingenuity is mind-blowing. Probably before now you wouldn't believe they outsmarted a frozen world with no tech. These tricks aren't just history, they're a reminder of human resilience. What could you do with their grit and creativity today? Think about it. Their teamwork and resourcefulness still inspire us. If you loved uncovering these caveman secrets, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss more epic survival stories. Drop a comment. Which trick blew your mind the most? And check out our other videos for more ancient wisdom. Let's keep exploring history together.